going to find yourself getting passed by multiple cars, as I mentioned earlier on. So Newhoff in a very precarious situation, but he often finds himself in these places. Doesn't qualify as well as he races. Only up front, they are getting with Lee Aberdeen and Luca Varani, not very far apart at all here. But I just want to see how Alistair Haight deals with Marcello Kessler coming around the old hairpin. But I would say it's not the best decision they've ever made, just not having done that under the safety car, really.
Yeah, they're taking their pit stop strategies from Ferrari lately or something. What's going on?
In turn one, just too much gas on them, too much feet on the down pedal, and unfortunately he's dropped him all the way down the order. But Philip Hammer is out in front by an 8.91 seconds. Oh, Dan Michael is a wall there, sir. And it definitely doesn't want to be hitting that earlier on as well. Difficult, the understeer is in the dirty air through that final corner because it's such a long corner and you get dragged off into the grass very easily. He'll up the slipstream down it towards the chicane. Peterson was briefly alongside, but that slipstream has saved him and kept him in third. Yeah, Varani now lost a little bit of time to Aberdeen, about half a second. Peterson is all. Oh, Pike's pushed more and forward up ahead. He's got out of the line. Is now Pike going to have a go at Werrell? Don't push him off. He's in the championship fight. Jack Werrell chasing down Carl Jacklin. Further down, Rob Williams and Chris Barnes.
Sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's come back into play. Exactly. Miller's still such up. He's not on second and change. All of a sudden, Miller's back in play.
Moving on to the back end of Bill Jocelyn. So there's been a lot of movers and shakers in this first 2 laps here for race.
Absolutely serious racing. They give these a lot of fun. Yeah. It's all about the entertainment. So I hope everybody is enjoying themselves out there in the chat. We know that Ron is enjoying himself watching the Burger King machines off into the grass a little bit there as they're really bunching up now.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to JP Broadcasting. We're back, of course, for tail racing. The Apex is lava. Of course, we had a fantastic first 3 rounds to the championship. Myself and James had the pleasure of talking you through all the action over the duration of last week. But now we head back to the Nurburgring, one of the most infamous circuits in all of motorsport, for the 4th round, and we take some go-karts. Effectively, the Toyota GR86 battles their way around the Nordschleife, and you'll notice it's myself, Zach Sweeney, and a brand new commentator on the JP Broadcasting platform, of course, of Howie Burroughs. And Howie, how you feeling? How you feeling coming into your first broadcast on JP Broadcasting, and how you feeling about some GR86s in a very pitch black Nurburgring?
Well, first of all, I was excited for this combo going in before I found out how dark and wet it was going to be out there on the track today. So what was going to be a great race is about to get turned up to 11. When it comes to joining these gigs for the first time, well, you're a little bit nervous every time you jump into a show, but it's natural once the show starts going, I think.
Let's hope, fingers crossed, because if you're terrible, I will rinse you. No, I won't. It's fine. But anyway, we're going to jump into, of course, just going to talk through about the standings, because we've got a little bit of time before the race starts. Of course, it was an eventful first 3 rounds. We had GT3s, the Formula Fords, and the TCRs battle their way around 4 laps of the Nurburgring. And after all of that, a very consistent run of 3 podiums and a victory for Evan Krautwald sees him take the top spot in the championship. But still a long way to go in terms of the overall dynamic of this season. Matt Green, again, more consistency rewarding him in terms of coming in second place. Jason Hightower from Dave Fernandez and Corey Stas are very, very close, second, third, fourth, and fifth, with only 7 points separating the entirety of the 4 drivers. Steve Cabay from Ratio, then comes Dan Kosick and Chase Petterjohn. Dave Mull rounds out the top 10 with 2 of our race winners, just to show how important consistency is. Pat Labrosse and Connor Acatella, P11 and P15 respectively. So with the way this championship works, Howie, with each round not being a different circuit but being a different car, it just goes to show that being consistent is going to get you a lot further in the championship than the odd win.
Yeah, track knowledge is important everywhere, but it's basically a different art on the Nurburgring with so many more corners than you can even count. You should see my incident rating in Ringmeister. It is an absolute terror. 154 corners on this horrifying circuit. If you know it, you can bring any car to it, and after just a little bit of practice, make your way around more consistently than anybody else out there on the grid. It's a very, very different kind of racing. It's very much about you versus yourself versus the limits of the track. Very few passing opportunities, but as you said, it's about that consistency and about that understanding that it's so hard to get on other circuits.
So what would you say is more important about the Nürburgring and about this championship then? Is it going to be knowing the track, or is it going to be the familiarity in the car? What will get you further in the race?
Well, those who are the absolute strongest at both are no doubt going to be the champions at the end of the day. But if you know the corners well here, you can attack with confidence. And as long as you know even a little bit about how your car handles, you can have a degree of understanding of the track, a way that some people, like, as I said, throw me on the track. I'm unconfident. I'm guessing around every corner. I'm sort of running it slowly just to try and make it home. But those that know where they can attack, where they can back off, where they can carry great speed through corners, you only got to do it a few times to get around this track successfully in this series, 4 laps in total. So it's a lot of it. It's the track experts and it's people like Evan Krautfeld who have absolutely shown week after week their knowledge of the environment. Even if they can't win every time, it's points after points after points.
Exactly that. Well, let's talk you through the grid then. Rick Putnam takes us away from pole position. He's joined by Matt Green, second place in the championship, rounding out second place on the grid. Seth Ragona from Dean Diltz, that's row 2. Behind that comes Corey Stas to round out the top 5. Evan Krautwald continuing his consistent run there, completing row 3. Behind that, Patrick Missick and Jason Hightower, who's going to be looking to finally get himself to the top step after bottling it at the first ever round in the GT3s. That's row 4. David Mull from Tim Warchow, that's the top 10. Steve and Dan Kosick keep each other company on the 6th row. Of course, behind that, we've got a number of drivers. A very pretty stacked grid, actually, to be fair, it must be said. Alexander Patach from Scott Sadler. Then comes Jamie Bender. That's the top 15. He's alongside AJ Condon for the 8th row. LeBurton from Dylan Hesselink. That, I believe, is our 18th and final driver to take to the grid. There you can see, seems to be dry. It most definitely is. Actually, no, it's not dry. There is some spray coming off, so it's not even dry. It's not raining, but it's not dry. No, I say that. It is raining. I just couldn't see it. I'm blind, basically. So are these guys, because it's wet and it's dark. It's going to be a wild ride.
this completely changes the dynamic of driving in these cars. These cars usually have a bit of a history of being very, very compliant, very, very grippy, very easy to throw around the track and throw into corners. But if you apply too much confidence in these conditions, you're going to send yourself into every grass patch and every single wall imaginable. You're going to be on the side of fear.
You very much are, but they are going to be running their way through the final corner, not taking to the GP loop today, just the Nordschleife. So the iRacing pace truck peels into the pit lane, and we are about to get ourselves underway for 4 laps of racing action. Rick Putnam leads them then as Matt Green assembles in second place. A very tentative start, of course, because we're immediately onto the Nordschleife. No time really to react, and you've just got to try and acclimatise yourself to these very treacherous conditions. And going into turn 1, the last thing that you want to do is throw it into the barrier. Of course, David Mull with the best livery straight out the gates, KFC. He's going to be looking for a finger-looking good race.
Indeed. So these cars are particularly unique in that, as I said before, very, very grippy usually, very, very compliant around the corners, but they do have a particularly brutal suspension setup. On a very big and bumpy track like this, sometimes taking huge bumps too hard or too fast can hugely unsettle you and can throw you off. And I know those curbs on the Nordschleife are pretty infamous for being giant speed bumps in your way. So I'm going to be curious to see how people attack these curbs and attack these bumps in the track and are able to get around them in, as you've described it, the go-kart of GT cars.
Yeah, the JR86, I've never liked them, I've got to be honest, to drive at least. The suspension is very soft, you get a lot of body roll, and it responds to bumps fairly well, it must be said, but it is very difficult to ride onto that limit, at least for me. There's a reason I'm a commentator, let's put it that way. But these guys seem to acclimatising themselves fairly well. Couple of changes. Evan Krautwald has been able to pick himself up 2 places, same to Dean Dilt up into 3rd, just 1 place ahead. Couple of losers though, David Mull, Seth Ragona down 2 places in the initial start, but that's understandable because it's a long race, 4 laps of the Nurburgring. It's wet and it's dark. There's no reason to go out there pushing as Corey Stas looks to the inside of Arenberg. Again, the inside line is going to be a little bit more slippery. So every corner is a learning curve for these drivers. And chances are the next time by is going to be another one because the track will change.
Yeah, this first lap, I think, is going to be a bit of a confidence check for drivers. Some people will inevitably back it up in the wet because they're waiting for people in front of them to make mistakes, to go off, to push it too hard. Whereas those drivers that feel like they can push and go far ahead very early on in the race are going to make those early passes. It can be hard to pass around here in many cars, but the R86s are a little bit different. They are very, very small, so you can actually go side by side quite often. As you can see up ahead, Seth Ragona looking behind Evan Krautwald. Be interested to see if he chooses to make a move, whether he just chooses to hang behind and wait it out. But we can see there Rick Putnam has run down the road already with a 2.6-second gap, and he might be looking to keep extending.
Yeah, he's going to. Obviously, that does help, funnily enough. The more you win a race by, the more comfortable the race is. I'm sure that's something Will Buxton would probably whip out and drive to survive in terms of obviousness. But it's true, this early stage is just about sort of bedding yourself in, finding your feet. And to be fair, it's astonishing and actually quite strange to see Rick Putnam acclimatising himself this well, because he's going into every corner blind. He has no reference whatsoever. Take Dean Diltz, for example. We're riding on board with him now in 3rd. He's got Matt Green in front of him. He can see what Matt Green does and immediately apply that to his own driving. In fact, actually, I say Rick Putnam was acclimatising himself well. He's not. He's made a huge mistake, and that's how quick the pendulum can swing. He's tumbled his way down to the bottom of the top 5, and I think he's got a rear left puncture.
Going to be the first of many around here. One of the risks of pushing that hard, obviously, is that you can easily just lose it for good. Look at me around every corner, even in the dry. His car looks absolutely total. He is well out of this.
Yeah, that is day done, but the show must go on. This is the fight for P2, and how quickly the stakes can rise. What once was a battle for P4 is now obviously changing itself into the battle for P2. Evan Krautwald catapults himself into 2nd place, continuing his consistency. He's not been off the podium thus far this season and is so reaping the benefits from it. Whatever car he jumps into, whatever the conditions, he jumps in, he acclimatises himself really, really nicely indeed. But Matt Green now 1.5 seconds ahead of Krautwald. And that is just how quickly things can change. You are never safe, no matter what. The Nurburgring and the dynamic of the wet weather in iRacing as well, still a very new thing, it must be said, will chew you up and spit you out if you give it the opportunity.
I was looking at Krautwald's gap, and while it looked like he was willing to hang back another 1.5 seconds, it looks like now he's made up some serious distance, just almost halved that to Matt Green, and gaining. Dean Dilt's behind as well. I think he's going to be looking to make a move here on that Green for the lead sooner rather than later. And if you are in a lead, you do stay there, maybe you can just use that confidence to keep yourself up ahead. We could be going side by side very, very soon into the next few corners.
Yeah, potentially so. I mean, it is difficult, obviously, at the Nurburgring to make moves, particularly even more so in the wet, because one small mistake, as has been proven, can definitely be fatal. But if the opportunity opens the door like that, a huge snap of oversteer from our championship leader, Dean Dilt, with that more consistent run, just puts his foot down and takes a nice tentative run through, not even really contested by the time they reach the next corner. And again, each corner is a new experience for these drivers. They're applying, obviously, all of their experience from wet weather driving to try and have a go, but it's always different. And if you can just find that small little nook and cranny, that small little niche way of driving into each corner, you will find a lot of time. And it's going to fluctuate, isn't it? Dean Diltz right now seems to be the driver to beat in terms of pace, but give it a couple of corners and Evan Krautwald might again find something and switch it on. So that's the very fun thing about wet weather driving, is that it's constantly changing, constantly adapting, and you never really are sure who's the best.
Diltz looks like he wants to make his move soon, going uphill through these S's. Matt Green, I don't know whether he's staring more in his mirror or at the tracks ahead. Maybe it might be best for him not to look at what's going on behind, looking at the wet and wild conditions. I'm also going to be curious as to how Krautwald drives from here. He could easily go push for this win, or he could hang in this P3, because we have Sean Ragona 2.5 seconds behind. As you said, consistency is going to be key in this championship. But I think he's got a bit of a racer spirit in him. I think he wants to get every position he possibly can and make up for that loss. I don't know who's going to get attacked first here in this train up at the front.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the thing, because do you want to lead knowing how treacherous the conditions are? Because Krautwald right now, he can chill there, he can look what the two in front of him are doing, he can adapt his driving and gain data and learn and sort of find what they're doing, find what he can do better, and then attack later on in the race. Right now, is there really much benefit in attacking this early? Because we saw there Dean Diltz trying a slightly different line going into YouTube corner, and his momentum suffered. Matt Green was able to obviously extend that gap a little bit more, and that is exactly what Evan Krautwald can sit back, look at, analyse, and then make a push for later in the race.
I can see Krautwald's gap now to car behind Seth Ragona. We're approaching 3.5 seconds. That could even grow with time. He doesn't even need to think about the car behind anymore.
Oh, nice!
Diltz on board, he has lost it. Pushing a little bit too hard. He's going to get to keep that third position, but that has given Krautwald that second, and I think he's going to use that to attack Matt Green as soon as possible. The snap oversteer can catch you at any time in these cars, especially with the traction control, which sometimes just doesn't help you out in the rain.
Yeah, sometimes it's actually a hindrance to have traction control. Obviously, the way it works is it analyzes the wheel speed of each wheel, and if one starts spinning a lot quicker, it obviously means that it's lost traction, and it will cut power to that wheel, which means that if you want to try and, power slide and put some opposite lock on, you can't do that, because the moment you try and plant the throttle down, it's not going to give you any throttle response, and you actually sort of bog down and then spin because of it. So instead of trying to just plant the throttle and power slide, you end up just spinning as such. So sometimes it can be more of a hindrance than a help if you're trying to sort of get a little bit of lock on. But thankfully for Dean Diltz, he was able to sort of save it, which, I had that reaction because it was a very, very good save, nearly completely totaled the car. But that is one of those, heart in the mouth moments, isn't it? Because one small mistake like that doesn't even need to be by much, like that one right there from Seth Ragona, and that could well be day done.
Every corner can be completely lethal with the balls that close, and that is another example of it. Seth Ragona running well, loses 3 positions on the grid. You can see here his steering's damaged. He could make it back around the track, but that's going to be another stop in the pits. We've already seen a few drivers have to tow their way, probably out this race for good. Meanwhile, up front, Krautwald is going to make a draft here on Matt Green down the long straight. He's going to get side by side. We don't have the Grand Prix circuit, but he can get that pass still completed here well before the start-finish line.
Yeah, easily done going into Tiergarten. Of course, this has been the site of a lot of drama. Think back to round 1 in the GT3s, where Evan Krautwald was able to take that victory because Jason Hightower, unfortunately, after leading the entire race, dropped it on that final lap. through that final sequence of corners, and maybe that's an ideology that Krautwald is going to take once again. A fight a little bit further back, David Mull, of course, in that KFC livery, looking very dinged up, it must be said, already been in the wars. He is in a three-way fight. He's got Tim Warchow ahead, Scott Sadler in behind in a fight for P9. So good to see that even further down, these drivers are keeping each other company and battling away quite hard. They're about to complete their first lap. Are we going to see any more surprises peeling their way into the pit lane? No, we're not. They continue. In fact, actually, no, we do. Seth Rigona, of course, naturally comes in. I think Scott Sadler did as well off the back of this train. So he'll be in to obviously take some repairs, which is a shame because it effectively puts you out of the race. I mean, unless you've got a fast repair and you can get it done and go quickly, even then it's going to be so difficult to make up places. But as long as you're in the race, there's an opportunity for you to go forward, because the moment you DNF, that's it, right? You've got no opportunity to go forward. You stay in the race, other people can still suffer misfortune, other people can still DNF or disconnect or whatever, and you can still bag some points. So just being in it is going to be rewarding at the end of the race if you can sort of just suck it up and get on with a boring race at the back.
Wow, you've just summarised my mentality to iRacing in general. Now the tightest battle on the grid going on right now is Dean Dilt up in third against Matt Green. He's looking to maintain this position and hopefully take advantage of any offs. Matt Green started second on the grid. He's ended his way back up there, but Evan Krautwald has just made it off into the distance. I wouldn't count on Matt Green to catch him on the track anytime soon, but obviously we've now just seen the risk of mistakes around every last waking moment of this track. If one of those happens, which even the best drivers are capable of in the rain, it's so unpredictable, even Evan's capable of it, then this race could get opened up back at the front again. But until then, Evan's going to settle into his groove, and Dean is going to look for this P2.
Yeah, and to be fair, at the moment, that is pretty much all they're going to be fighting for on pure pace. We've touched on it, of course, with how easy mistakes can be to happen. And as a racing driver, naturally, you want to get as many places as you can forward. But also, for Dean Dilt, he doesn't want to give up, because should Krautwald make a mistake, if he gets in front of Matt Green, he then inherits the race lead for free. And again, it's that quick swing, the turn on its head as to how fast things can go from, yeah, we're fighting for this, to, oh my goodness, we're fighting for a race lead or something a lot more significant. So Dean Dilt needs to be in it to win it. And in fairness, 3 seconds off the back of Krautwald isn't a million miles away. They're still within range to potentially apply some pressure to him.
This is such a survival race. This is so interesting. Such a survival race between these drivers, because in typical conditions, you're battling other people on the track. I think the most daring drivers could still make on-track passes now, but quite frankly, here you are battling yourself. You are battling the car. You are battling the track, just trying to make it around in this rain, just trying to hope that the mistakes happen around you. I've noticed that all the drivers have made it into the pit lane, other than Steve Cube, have made it out, so they could easily now take advantage of other people making mistakes as big as them up ahead, which there's still 2.5 laps to go. There's still plenty of time for that to happen.
Exactly that. At the Nurburgring, anyone can have issues at any time. It very much is indiscriminate, is the world of motorsport, and you've got to be very, very careful indeed. This is the fight for the top 10. AJ Condon ahead of Scott Sadler in the world of the slightly further down part of the field, but still definitely the brink of the top 10 is something that Sadler wants to go and get. Of course, he was one of the drivers that came into the pit lane off that first lap and is now trying to recover. Of course, Condon inherited that P10 because of Sadler coming into the pit lane. Now Sadler wants it back. Condon's going to do everything in his power to make sure he protects it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even these small positions are point scoring, and even these small positions can suddenly become big with the mistakes up ahead, up front. But with this just being a very consistency-based championship, I'd fight for every position all the way down the grid. There's also points rewards for fastest laps out there, which you can achieve no matter where you are. Scott Sadler now really pulling up. He's going to go side by side, but he's on the outside for the next corner. He does win out in the braking zone there. Scott Sadler getting up ahead into P10 and already working his way down the road.
Yeah, and again, that is just where they're driving for you. Some drivers really take to it quite nicely. Other drivers take a little bit of warming up, because it's so sort of counterintuitive is where they're driving sometimes. You know, you're so used to braking as far over on the circuit as you can to maximize the arc of the angle and carry as much corner speed through. You're so used to braking in this way, and of course applying the throttle in one way as well. As oh my goodness me, Scott Sadler, after just getting himself back into the top 10, has binned it into the barrier, I'd assume, for the second time in a lap. But that's the thing, with the driving is so counterintuitive. It goes against almost every rule that you've been taught as a racing driver.
And of course, when it comes to the racing line, I'm still not used to the wet line. The idea that the rubber on the racing line is actually dangerous and slippery still messes me up sometimes. I still touch curbs in the rain on tracks with flat curbs, and I'll just spin you out. They're like ice in an absolute instant. You have to do everything absolutely against your instincts at all times, and you make one tiny mistake, and you don't even know what the mistake was sometimes. What exactly did Scott do to spin off that track? It's sometimes really obvious on the dry, and sometimes in the wet, it just feels like, wow, that just happened. My car just spun around. It's so hard to predict and so hard to read.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why sort of data and analysing the driver in front is so important, because you see what they do going in, you see what they works, and then you can adjust. You'll see that these drivers take such vastly different lines through different parts of the circuit depending on where that grip is, and also the steering, the braking inputs, everything has to be so smooth, because one small discrepancy and it is just going to spit you out. But look at that, they're nowhere near that inside apex. They're actually trailing their way through the middle of the circuit, because that is where the grip is. You've got to go and find it. It's going to be different. Of course, on the racing line, that's where the rubber is. When it gets wet, rubber gets slippery. You don't want to be anywhere near it. The laminate curbs, the paint, again, when that gets wet, it gets extra slippery, and it just sort of adds up into a lot of different variables, and you need to just go and search for that grip. So braking offline, going deeper into a corner and trying to get a cutback at the second apex. There are so many different ways to tackle a corner in the wet weather. You just need to find out which technique applies to which corner, and unfortunately for the Nurburgring, there's a lot to go and learn.
As we just approach the passing of the halfway mark, as we are quite close here to the start-finish straight. I see Dean Dilts making up some good distance on Matt Green. I think he's going to go for that draft pass down the straight. It's a huge straight, and we've already seen one big slipstream happen. If you're within a second, it's almost as powerful as DRS. No, that straight is so long. It doesn't quite go the whole way down onto the Grand Prix circuit this time, so you do have that quite harsh right-hander as you enter pit road, but it's still long enough for these cars, which are super power limited, to get that big draft advantage.
Yeah, pretty much. Unfortunately for Corey Stas, as you can see, he has had another issue and had a spin. Of course, it's been a very attritional race for each and every single one of these drivers, and again, that GR86 definitely looks fairly dinged up, to say the least. But you're right, that Dottingerhoe, that back straight off the coming off that long right-hander onto the Dottingerhoe, you then go under the bridge into Tiga and the left, right, and then very right again. It's such a tricky right-hander to tackle, but the Dottingerhoe is one of the easiest overtaking opportunities on the circuit. Jamie Bender, unfortunately, fielding the very lovely Subaru 555 inspired livery, and unfortunately can't quite hold the slide as well as Colin McRae did back in the day. Otherwise, he'd still have been pointing the right way.
If you're a World Rally champion, maybe you can take on these conditions and become the greatest driver that's ever been on the Nurburgring. Jason Hightower approaching here on the timing tower, Matt Green. I think he's going to make that pass down there on the back straight, side by side. As I said, the draft advantage here, very, very big if you get it with the power limitation on these cars. So he's going to slot his way into P3. There might be enough time here, though, for Matt Green to try again, that just being how long the Dottinghoe is. He's making up the time. We're approaching the end of the straight, though. It could get dangerous to make a crazy move here. Within 0.3 of a second, as we approach these small, weak little S's up the road going into the turn. I don't think he's going to make it stick this time. There's always plenty more chances to get past in that section. Jason Hightower inheriting P3, a huge gap of Dean Dilts up ahead, so he just wants to focus on this battle rather than pushing for anything else right now.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, realistically, where is your ceiling? You know, you have to be able to sort of set yourself attainable goals, achievable goals that you can go and get. Otherwise, you are just going to be disappointed come the race's end. You need to drive within the confines of your car, and your skill level. I mean, funnily enough, there is a lot of ego that goes on with racing drivers. They do all have one, and it's easy to sort of push the boundaries a bit too much, ask a bit too much of the car, and unfortunately go a little bit haywire. However, we've got a pretty decent battle a little bit further down. Seth Ragona and Jamie Bender, both of whom have had some issues. They're battling their way through, just come out of the Kleiner carousel, the smaller carousel of the two, and they're fighting their way for what is P13, and probably reminiscent, that number, of the race they've had thus far. But we've already started the third lap, so we're halfway through the race at the front. Evan Krautwald leading Dean Diltz, only by 3.5 seconds though. The last lap by, I say, was only 2 seconds quicker from Evan Krautwald, but a wet Nurburgring, to be within 2 seconds of each other's pace is actually pretty decent. And it wouldn't take much for Dean Diltz to close 3.6. One snap of oversteer and Krautwald has lost that straight away.
Drafting pass here onto Seth Ragona. Looks like we're going to get on the back straight here as we have the side-by-side pace. Pulling just about ahead there. Patrick Edge pulling ahead, going down the dotting O into the beginning of the next lap. Further up the grid, Matt Green and Jason Hightower look like they are really still in the chase with each other around here. I think with Dean Diltz, the strategy is going to be to just slowly make up pace over the course of this lap. 2 laps to go would be tiny anywhere but the Nurburgring, and I think if you just get your apexes slightly better, you don't think about overpush, just think about running your own clean pace, we could have a real battle for that lead up at the front at the very, very end. Very, very attritional around here, but it's also very, very long. There's still a lot of time left to go. Fortunately, you can't quite see Evan in the distance from that sort of length away, so you have to sort of guess about how well you're doing. But we can see a battle, and that's Matt Green completely missing that corner.
Unfortunate spin then for Matt Green. He's going to have to try and fight his way back forward, but I don't know, unfortunately, if that might well be day done. The front bumper, of course, is gone, and it's going to be a lot of time to close back in on Jason Hightower, whose podium does seem fairly secure. But, of course, at the sharp end of the field, it's Krautwald from Dean Diltz. There is Jason Hightower, of course, who's running very, very nicely in P3, trying to take, of course, his second podium of the season. Krautwald, of course, leading the way by 4.4 seconds. And we're already closing into the latter portion of this race. Just about a lap and a half remaining, and still mistakes starting to creep in. Just goes to show how hard these drivers are pushing and how easy it is, of course, to make a mistake. It's been the talk of the town, hasn't it, Howie, with just how tricky this circuit is.
Well, you say the top 3 is locked in, but I wouldn't be anywhere near that confident right now about it. I think as the race goes on, these incidents are going to get worse and worse. The pressure's going to build. It's very mentally exhausting running around this track so many times by itself. It's doubly mentally exhausting to do it all in the rain. It's just, it's an endurance mountain. And no doubt we're just going to see off after off after off, I think. Don't even think this is the beginning of the end of it. Alexander Batash right now looking in on Matt Green. Bit off making the pass at this moment, but there's so many good passing opportunities in these cars as he winds in the distance to half a second. We could see something going on well in this back half of this track.
Potentially so. I mean, Batash has just had a really good run through that triple right-hander, keeping it nice and tidy on the apex, as opposed to Matt Green, who definitely is maybe still struggling for a bit of confidence. You can see the disparity in the 2 lines there. Batash taking a nice slow in, fast out approach. Matt Green goes deep, and the Austrian driver of Batash is able to find his way through and up in a 4th place quite nicely indeed. Is that Toto Wolff on the side of his car? I think it's team principals. It's Mattia Bonotto. It is. What a guy. I don't know. Is that better than the KFC livery?
I like it. I've noticed a good smile car up here, and I'm always a cheerer for that one. Maybe that just says something about my personality type, though. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
Matt Green down behind, looking to potentially get this position back in the next few corners. This battle, I think, is going to keep developing over the next few corners. I don't see it ending until someone makes a serious mistake.
Yeah, well, Matt Green has already been victim of one of those, and it all depends as to the extent of the damage that he's got, of course, on the front end of that GR86. It doesn't look pretty, but it's only the front bumper, which obviously is going to add a bit more to the drag and whatever, if you want to really get nitpicky with it. But provided that the steering geometry is okay, the front bumper does nothing in terms of downforce, right? It's not going to add any grip or anything like that, maybe like minuscule levels, but nothing drastic. The main thing is going to be the suspension components, particularly the steering, that if they're okay, he will be okay. but based on the disparity in pace between Batash and Matt Green, maybe there is something ever so slightly wrong, out of balance, that's been bent, or whatever it is. He is not settling back into the usual groove that we saw. Maybe, again, it's just a confidence thing. Maybe he is just too scared to drop it again.
That's quite a fast, easy section there. Quite a few corners that are relatively flat out even in these conditions, and you can just see that he's just instantly lost the entire gap, and Corey Stas is looking for the next place up the road. So I think that damage has seriously wounded that car, and I don't know whether it's worth trying to make a pit stop at this point, or whether you just sort of suck it up with almost 1 lap to go and you just, you know, lose a couple positions on the road, but as long as you can make it down, I don't see too many more cars making up that difference. Difficult decision to make in this context, but he's the only one that can make that call. He's the one driving the car. He knows how it feels, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've not really been able to drive too much in the wet in iRacing, and to be fair, I do like the idea of it, because the wet weather, like I said earlier, it's so counterintuitive, it's so backwards thinking, but it is such a huge skill to learn. And what you'll often find is that those that are quick in the wet are quick in the dry, but those that are quick in the dry aren't always quick in the wet. So nailing the wet weather dynamic is going to be huge in sort of enabling you to sort of take your driving to that next step. And the racing you get is fantastic. Corey Stas, though, absolute rocket ship around the outside of Matt Green, who got caught up, I believe, on the curb and is tumbling down. I would be surprised if we don't see him come into the pit lane at the end of this lap. He's not that slow that it's warranting a tow, but he definitely is substantially off pace. There has got to be something wrong.
Even Dan Kossik's now making up distance. I mean, Tim Watchow could get it done in another lap if he runs at this pace. I think at this point, it's very, very, very likely he's going to make this car drivable again and get back out. It's not really in character for him to be running slowly and uncompetitively after we've seen all the fighting around this race, so that's definitely a wider damage problem on the track. Now, looking further up the grid, Evan Krautfeld has made that gap that was 3.5 seconds, or while we were talking about the possibility of Dean Dilts making up that time, up to 8 seconds and growing. If he doesn't make a serious mistake, which is always on the list, as we know, as we've seen a million times, even for the most experienced drivers. If he doesn't make a serious mistake, though, I think he could end up walking away with this win. It'll be interesting to see whether it happens, though. I think there have been upsets aplenty and more still to come.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of attrition of motorsport, like I said earlier, it really does bite when you least expect it, and you can't be lulled into that false sense of security. You're riding on board with Matt Green, and look at that. I spoke about the suspension and the steering. That is telling of a very broken one at that. The track rod ends and all the control arms must have just been bent, and what effectively it has done is heavily towed in or towed out one side of the car, and that's why the steering wheel is slightly left-hand down to have the steering wheel straight. Sometimes it's a purposeful setup change. In this case, it most definitely is not, to have that big of a disparity between what is parallel, and he's doing some very tricky driving, let's put it that way. Turning right is easy enough. Turning left is where it becomes difficult, because he's got a significantly smaller turning circle. He's doing all right considering, I will give him that much. Considering that the steering is bent around a technical circuit in the wet, he could be doing worse. He does have a fast repair, so it'll be in and out by the time he gets to the pit lane. A top 10 is still easily salvageable from Matt Green.
Yeah, that fast repair is going to save the day and probably get him out on the track ahead of Tim Watchow. As Evan Quartwell crosses the line to start the final lap. 7-second gap in it. It's going to take a serious mistake to make up for this, as Dan Kozik getting past Matt Green down the straight as he limps his way into the pit. He probably will still make it out in P7 with the fast repair. He hasn't made it stop yet, so he'll be able to run out and see what he can pick up in the final leg of this race.
Exactly that. And again, it goes back to what we were saying about sort of being in it to win it as such. You know, you sort of write your day off and that's day done. And you can't gain from that. You continue on, you suck it up, and you keep going, you persevere. That's then when you're able to secure some good results. Literally just this weekend, was commentating on the Enduro Car Championship, the Endurance Series, and so many teams suffered with wheel bearing issues. One of the teams had to do an engine change midway through the race, and even then they didn't write the car off and give up. And because of that, granted they were hundreds of laps down because of how long it took them, But they then were able to get back out, and because of other retirements, make up a couple of places. And at the end of the day, points mean prizes that you have to do. Matt Green is into the pit lane. It'll be an easy stop, repair, get back out, and try and secure some good results. Because in what is a very long championship, don't do that. Don't do that. That is such an easy mistake to make, but one that's cost him a couple of seconds.
And that could cause... Now, Watchow has indeed come into the pits just behind. He must have taken damage as well. AJ Condon. Now the next one up the road that looks like he could inherit this position. He's inherited it from Watchow. Quite far down the road from Matt Green, 8 seconds. And Matt Green has no real chance of making up on Dan Kozik on pace at this rate, but there's going to be mistakes and plenty in this final lap as drivers push as they reach the maximum of their mental and physical endurance around here. There's still so many surprises around every corner, and now any damage you take, you're bringing into the end of the race. No more good laps, no more fast repairs for you. It's going to be tricky. David Munn also pulling into the pit lane now after taking some damage. We can see down the back. So many incidents, we can't catch them all on camera.
Yeah, and he's onto the jacks, actually, and changing tyres. So the tyre wear wouldn't be that bad to warrant changing tyres. The only reason in conditions like this, in a race as long as this, is because he's going from wets to slicks. As you can see, that most definitely is not what he's doing, because the weather is still pouring, the track is still completely drenched. He's not going on slicks. I don't know whether or not he's just forgotten to untick the box to change tyres, or if he's spun that much that they are just completely shot and unusable, whatever that is. There is our race leader, by the way. He's coming through the first sector of the Nordschleife for the final time. 7 seconds clear of Dean Diltz. Now, we've seen it so far this season twice, the leader dropping it and allowing someone else to win. Evan Krautwald has benefited from it before. That's how he took his first win in the GT3s for round 1. He does not want to be the one inciting said action. He wants to bring this home nice and easy. He's got 7 seconds to play with and just bring it home for the win.
Looks like AJ Condon has just retired from the race. So he just made a major tow from quite far back on the track. That's going to be essentially an entire lap's worth to make up. Another incident, catching out another driver out on the grid today. It's happening just front, left and centre. Every lap, every few corners, there's another opportunity for someone to make a horrible, horrible mistake. And it can even catch out the best of us. I wouldn't count out some of these top drivers from changing the grid anyway from now. And as I've said, your mistakes are pretty much lethal at this point. You pretty much don't get another lap to make up for that time. You don't get another repair, and your toes pretty much send you out of the race entirely. So we're going to just see this keep developing.
Exactly. And obviously, for those that watched the second round where we took to the Formula Fords at the Nurburgring, that was also a wet and wild race. And effectively, I can't remember exactly what it was, but after 2 laps, half the grid was out, right? That is how high the attritional rates were at the Nurburgring. And unfortunately, everyone who has had issues are pretty much down and out. But that is just showcasing how important consistency is over everything else. Even if you're 10 seconds a lap off the pace, if you don't spin, chances are you're probably not going to be doing too bad in terms of points haul, purely because you've gotten to the end of this race. You don't need to lead a single lap, bar the last one. Evan Krautwald still has the opportunity for something to go wrong. He needs to minimize that by just driving within the confines of him and the car.
I would ask if this gets lonely running up at the front like this, but quite frankly, every corner is still a challenge in these conditions, and every corner is still an achievement. The Nurburgring, it's a great endurance challenge, and we've seen some amazing battles around here, but very much it's often about you as much as it's about the other people around here, and I don't think it ever gets boring. I think the reason it's become such a world-renowned track is even running by yourself up at the front week by week, getting top 3s like another one that Krautwald looks like he's just ready to lock in. I don't think it ever gets boring running different cars around here every week, week in, week out. New conditions, new challenges, new opponents, and he's not won every single time, but he's getting ready to rack this on top of his streak of podium finishes right now and further extend his lead in this championship.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it will be his second win, of course, of the season. He's been on the podium, each and every single one of them, but he's not taken a pole position. He's not taken a fastest lap. He has just been that guy that's so much more consistent than the rest. And in a championship where you're constantly having to battle one of the most tricky circuits in the world, in the form of the Nordschleife, where you're constantly having to adapt to different cars and different conditions. Of course, let's not forget they're going to be taking to a plethora of different sort of styles of cars as the season goes on, with sort of DRA6. And oh my goodness me, he's dropped it. Has he got enough time to get back going again? He has. He'll be fine. Lead is fine.
I can't believe it. 9-second gap between him and Dean Dilt's behind. No, it's down to 3 seconds now, but that's still enough. If he just runs consistently, yeah, it was 1.8, it was just a little bit slow to update there, but that's still, he's taken no damage, he's not touched anything. Dean Dilt is going to push for all his life now to see if he can make up a miraculous win. If it happens, it'll be an absolute stunner. We had a buzzer beater finish last week around. We could easily have it again. He's making up this time. He's going to be pushing harder and harder, but pushing too hard, it could easily lead to the end of his race as well. This is not over.
No, it's not. And the stakes have risen substantially for Dean Diltz. He can see the lead right in front of him. He's got the upper ground here. Evan Krautwald is under pressure. He's got to compose himself, get back into the swing of things, and bring it home for victory. But oh no, Dean Diltz has dropped it with a perfect opportunity ahead of him, and he has thrown it away. He is into the wall on the final lap. Absolute calamity for the top two. What damage has he got? Can he limp it home and be okay? It seems that because it was a side-on hit, he's going to be okay.
I see some steering damage, but it's a 22-second gap behind to Jason Hightower. It would have to be really serious for it to... But it looks like it is really serious looking at this interval on the track. They've only got 20% of the track left to go, but I can see him making up seconds and seconds and seconds, Jason Hightower here. This could go down to the wire, though, just for third.
But has he got the straight line speed? As long as he can keep that car pointing straight, he should be okay. It's going to be so difficult for Jason Hightower to close. There is only the Dottinger Hoa and Tiergarten left, effectively. That's what Evan Krautwald has to negotiate and what he's on right now. Same too for Dean Diltz. If that car has got straight line speed, he will be okay, as long as he doesn't completely throw it into Tiergarten. It's going to be a calamitous final few corners. Jason Hightower, he needs to be pushing to close that gap.
We could have a last lap push near the end. For P9 and P8, Rick Putman and Scott Sadler look like they're about to go side by side. Rick Putman taking the place just to secure some extra points near the end. But it looks as if as we go down the dotted hoe, unless there's a horrendous mistake, this top three looks just about locked in. As you said, there wasn't quite enough time to make up that gap. I would have loved to see what would have happened if that happened earlier on in the lap. Evan Krautwald, he got first in the first race, he's got second in the second race, he got third in the third race, could have been fourth in the fourth race, but it looks as if he's going to make another first on this calendar.
He is. He's going to take victory in 2 races of the 4 thus far. He retains that podium streak, and granted, he made the mistake on that final lap, but he retains his crown as the most consistent driver thus far for the Apex is Lava Racing Championship. Victory for Evan Krautwald once again, and in treacherous conditions, he has tamed the Nordschleife once more. Dean Diltz limps it home to the flag for P2 after a very sizable whack to the barrier on that final lap. He brings it home in second and does wonders for his championship charge. Of course, on debut, actually, Dean Diltz, Jason Hightower, another podium.
I mean, that spin could have been for Evan just a few inches in either direction, and that spin is an absolute disaster. Is it luck? Is it pure concentrated skill to make it out of those spins and not make it off the track? Does it even matter anymore? Quite frankly, it must have been a very, very, very scary run at the end. It proves that even the best aren't immune from mistakes, but the most consistent have it happen to them the least. And those that get away with the most distance here have that margin that they can use to make those sorts of mistakes. Evan with just one mistake, but he started quite far down the grid this time, down in P6, but he was able to push his way all the way to the front just by biding his time, running his own race, and consistently getting himself down to the end as the rest of the grid slot in behind him. I don't see any major gaps ready to be made up, maybe around the very back between Seth Ragona and Dylan Hesselink, but other than that, we're just seeing these drivers. It's amazing that they even made it here to the very end. I don't think I could have done it in these cars, in these conditions.
Exactly. It's been a very treacherous set of affairs here at the Nurburgring for round 4. Let's take a look as to how things have racked up over the duration of 4 laps. Evan Krautfold, of course, our race winner, but it wasn't easy. Dean Dilt gave him pressure all the way to the final lap and then unfortunately dropped it himself, but was still good enough for P2 on debut here for Tail Racing. Jason Hightower in third ahead of Alexander Batash, who had a fantastic battle, it must be said, and brings himself in 4th place. Corey Stas rounds off the top 5 after an unfortunate mistake on lap 1, fights his way back through for 5th. Dan Kosick from Matt Green, that's 6 and 7. Green unfortunately having a couple of issues himself and drops down to 7th, but it's still a decent place in the top 10. Rick Putnam, of course, our pole sitter, down 7 places, finishing 8th. An unfortunate result for him after looking to claim victory. Scott Sadler from Tim Warchow, that's the top 10. Behind that comes Dylan Hesselink and Seth Rigona, who was in the pit lane after the end of the first lap, but brought it back for P12. David Mull ahead of AJ Condon, who unfortunately had an issue going on to that penultimate lap. He rounds out in 14th. Benjamin Lamberton, that's top 15 from Patrick Messick, Jamie Bender, and Steve Cabay, the 18th and final driver to be classified, albeit 4 laps down and not seeing the end of lap 1. Howie, just sort of summarise that race then, I suppose, because while it was dark and we couldn't see a lot, there was definitely a lot to see out on circuit with it being so wet and wild.
Well, the drivers could see even less, quite frankly. This was going to be a game in these conditions of just keeping it together, keeping yourself composed, not thinking about the other drivers around you too much, but making sure that you tame these conditions and you run at a manageable pace, a manageable, consistent pace. The top drivers got there. They were pretty fast, and they were faster than some of those around them, but mostly they got there through being the safest, being the most consistent, and avoiding the trouble around them. Some of the fastest laps in the whole race happened quite far down the grid, but you're not going to be able to make those fast laps if you take it into the wall and take serious damage. And just seeing drivers like Evan there at the very end, only one spin in the whole race, and it was a minor one, and he built up that gap, that calmness up ahead that allowed him to finish it out. So this has been a fantastic race.
It has been indeed. 4 laps of action as per usual, and we tick past that round number 4 of what is hopefully going to be a long and fantastic season. Evan Krautvold retaining that championship lead, extending it even more with his 2nd victory of this season, taking 2 of 4 wins. Can he back it up when we come back for round number 5 here for the Apex is Lava? My name has been Zach Sweeney, Howie Burroughs alongside me in the commentary box, and of course James Parfitt behind the scenes, pointing the cameras and making sure that the broadcast looks nice and pretty, and we're following all of the action. Of course, you've been watching along live on JP Broadcasting. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn the bell on for notifications, of course, to stay up to date with all things sim racing. Tail Racing will be back for round 5. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.
Jungle.